Hello, everyone. Welcome to A Room with a View. You're finding me here in Brooklyn. My name is Libby Flores, and I am the Director of Audience Engagement and Digital Production at Ball Magazine, beautifully displayed here. And those who don't know BAUM has been around since 1981. It supports the artist's voice, and it delivers the artist's voice. Our interviews are done artist to artist. So I'm going to probably bother you about subscribing to BAUM if you don't already during this Room with a View. And if you have subscribed, thank you very much. And we have a great night in store for you. Room with a View, if you don't know, if this is your first one, is where BAUM celebrates the work of our contributors, past and present. And tonight we have a great show. We are here in celebration of Carrie Moyer and Sheila Pepe's first museum collaboration. It is called Tabernacles for Trying Times, and it is now on view at the Portland Museum of Art. We are going to be dropping links in for you to go view that beautiful exhibition. It is only up until Sunday. This is something you don't want to miss, especially after this conversation. We will have some really lovely visual elements for tonight, so that's very exciting. And also to add, this is our first visual artist Room with a View, so you're in good hands. A few housekeeping notes. We have a question button, so make sure to add your questions as we go. Make sure to upvote the questions that you feel most passionate about, and our host will select those later when we get to the Q&A portion of the evening. We also have, like I said, the link will be coming through for the exhibition, and we'll also give you a link to subscribe to BAUM, so you have that available at your fingertips as well. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce your host for the evening. Anthony Hawley is an artist, writer based in New York City. His solo exhibitions and films have been presented by Vox, Papalu Gallery, Salina Art Center, Countercurrent, and the Menil Collection, the Aurora Picture Show, and most recently by the Guggenheim's Museum Works in Process series. He is the author of 2 collections of poetry, and his writing on art and film appear in The Brooklyn Rail, Freeze, Artforum Online, Hyperallergic, BAUM, Art Agenda, and elsewhere. So let's give a warm welcome. Feel free to put some claps in the chat to Anthony. Take it away.
Thank you, Libby.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone at BAUM for having this space for conversation. It's a total honor to be here tonight with these 2 dazzling humans, Sheila Pepe and Carrie Moyer, to discuss their inaugural museum exhibition, Tabernacles for Trying Times, which I was saying to them before, I feel a little bit guilty, but maybe it's also bragging rights. I actually got to see this in person a couple of weeks ago, and it's on view at the Portland Museum of Art for just another week. And then in January, we'll travel to the Museum of Art and Design. I'm going to give a little introduction to Sheila and Carrie. It felt like tonight we needed something special beyond just the basic bios, which you'll get in a minute. But I told them what I created for them was what I'm calling a poetic bio for the spaces they create. And I'm going to start with that and then go into theirs. And it's called Rooms for New Views. Materials to disperse this space. Surfaces to disappear this place. Materials to help us eat away the architecture. Surfaces to help us become other creatures. Parlors to gather in, parlors to holler in, factory to author everybody's autobiography, factory to generate intergalactic bejeweled emoji, totemic place, votive space, prismatic place, come undo me time and space, vernacular suspension, prismatic circulation, popsicle drip, chainmail clip, please enough patriarchy blip. After hours, the meaning is the matter.
Yay.
Yay.
Woohoo!
That's great.
Carrie Moyer is a painter and writer. She co-founded the public art project Dyke Action Machine, active in New York City between 1991 and 2008, with photographer Sue Schaffner. Moyer has written extensively about art for Art in America, the Brooklyn Rail, and Artforum, among other publications, and was the subject of a solo exhibition at the Worcester Museum of Art in 2012, and a traveling exhibition, Carrie Moyer, Pirate Jenny, which originated at the Tang Museum of Skidmore College, Saratoga Springs, New York, in 2013. She has received awards from the Guggenheim and Joan Mitchell Foundations, Anonymous Was a Woman, and Creative Capital, among others. Moyer is a professor in the Art and Art History Department at Hunter College, where she is the director of the graduate program. Sheila Pepe is an artist based in Brooklyn. Her recent mid-career survey, Hot Mess Formalism, was organized by the Phoenix Art Museum and traveled to the Everson Museum of Art in Syracuse, the Bemis Center of Contemporary Arts in Omaha, and the Decortiva Sculpture Park and Museum in Lincoln, Massachusetts. Pepe was a fellow at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study, Harvard University, from 1997 to 98. And in 2015, she was honored with a Distinguished Alumni Award from Mass College of Art and Design. And her practice was included in Faden's 2019 survey, Vitamin T, Thread and Textiles in Contemporary Art. So please help me welcome Sheila and Carrie, and thank you so much for being here. And I'd love to, if you could just start by telling us where you are, kind of in the spirit of this series, Room with a View.
We're both in our studios, across the hall from each other.
But truly, we can't hear each other.
No, very thick walls.
No, I'm in my most favorite room with a view.
Really?
Which is out into the parking lot behind the Army Terminal, Brooklyn Army Terminal.
Yeah, and my room doesn't have a view. I'm completely inside, no windows. But my view is like my brain. It's just like a mass of stuff from
there. It's all there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all loopy, doopy, and kind of a mess.
When you say your favorite room, is this your favorite studio you've had?
I
Carrie?
would say so, yes.
Yeah.
Sheila and I moved into the Army Terminal 2.5 years ago. So it's been amazing. I'm one of these people where I can happily be in here for 12, 14 hours and not even realize I haven't talked to anyone. So yeah, that's why we need to be across the hall from each other so we see each other on occasion.
Yeah.
So there'd be like a tap on the wall.
Yes, exactly.
Something, knock on the door. Hello.
Well,
but
go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to say, we're so grateful that you wanted to do this with us. It's really amazing. So, and on BOM, no less.
I know. I'm grateful for them.
And I recall that we saw you right before the lockdown. You were at the last public event we both attended at the same time.
The Armory, right?
The Armory, yeah.
Yeah.
Saw you. And then everybody went home for good.
So strange to think about. That was the last public event, and I think I saw one more show, and then nothing, and one gallery show in the past few weeks, and then your museum show in Portland, which was such a gem, and to be able to see that and be in it was such a treat, and especially because of just the kind of physical presence the entire experience of this show creates. And I actually thought that maybe we could start, since we're so focused on rooms tonight, we could start just by thinking about or discussing the different rooms that this exhibition manufactures for viewers, and just the kind of spaces that it opens up and engages with architecturally, historically, communally. I mean, there are very literally rooms created in this, like with the parlor for the people, right?
Mhm.
And Tabernacles, of course, hover over this whole show. And I don't have an image of it, but there's that great Dream Action Factory, which is kind of like a little hidden archive or library that for me seemed to intersect with, at least just in its title, the Dyke Action Machine, and trying to pursue sort of alternative ephemera. But I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about some of these physical spaces.
Well, the space you're talking about right now, as we're looking at Parlor from the People, if you look beyond it and through the purple yarn, which is Common Sense piece that was never activated, there are two little tiny collaborative paintings, and there's what we came to lovingly call the bowling alley down there. And that became our ephemera. Like, we both really wanted to put it was a suggestion that from Jamie, our curator, that we both really were into, where we would bring all the books and things that we naturally would pin up in the studio and have made, or love materials that I like, so we both have a different take on it. Carrie's a lot more graphic in some ways. And then other collaborative things that we've done together, stamps and yeah, go.
No, I was just going to say, to sort of pull back, I think one of the sort of overriding ideas of the show was treating the museum itself like this gathering space.
Yeah.
And because the PMA has this, double height, at least,
Right.
sort of atrium, we thought,
yeah,
we were both thinking of it as really connecting to how we thought of museums as kids, like these places that were both revelatory and sort of educational, and where you'd learn about other people. And so to create a kind of humane base around dialogue or something, I think that was one of the first impetuses.
I mean, for me, it's impossible to go into space and not want to address the architecture as a thing. And I hadn't yet seen anything in that space or documented anything that went all the way up to the top. So it was fun because I don't think they had produced anything like that. So it was a kind of real team effort in imagining something so like loud in that space. And I think that forum that, we call it a parlor because that's how we wanted to dress it, with objects that were comforting and said maybe even something domestic. But that,
and
like Carrie said, that it's like that this is a place we work, and that you could work too, in a way, by having your friends and family and their programming and all this other stuff come in and hang out here in the way that we would hang out when we're taking a break or solving a problem. It's like, yeah.
So pre-COVID, it was really meant to be a gathering place, because there are carpets and pillows and these little chairs that Sheila made, and so that's a little bit of the bittersweet part of this whole thing, is that we worked on this. The sort of central core of the show was this idea of gathering in different rooms for different kinds of ideas, even the way that Jamie sort of mapped it out.
Right.
In one portion of the museum, we talk a lot about activism and feminism. In other parts, we talk about sort of each of our own material prehistory, So there were different, that's the way the spaces sort of played out.
Hmm.
And the chairs for me were just a update of something that the Romans had used as a collapsible battle furniture, and then again was remade during the Renaissance as what you would call the Savonarola chair, and that it's like a regal, like everybody's regal in the space, like
Right.
everybody's got a chair, as in an academic chair, you know, chair. And then that's, that thing of it just being an important place, but also a playful, important place.
Right. I love that it's collapsible too. I mean, it's something that you
Well,
could arm
actually,
in a sense.
these, I didn't make them collapsible because I was a little worried about safety. I
Sure.
didn't want them to collapse on anybody while they were sitting in it. So they are the form of an originally collapsible chair, no longer collapsible.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always this thing about our fantasy about what the museum could be, and then the reality of wanting to make that fantasy practical for the visitor. So this kind of messing around with not being the artists with so high demands that it would be impossible for anybody to participate.
Right. I love this that we work here, you could work here too. It's really generous concept, but it's like almost an invitation to rewrite the exhibition as a visitor as you go, right? I mean, and I was thinking a lot about kind of stagecraft. I mean, there's literally a painting, of course, by Carrie called Stagecraft in the show, but there's certain elements like that do exactly what you were describing, this sort of invitation to work and play in this space. But there are literally kind of prosceniums, theaters, little, the American Bardo here, where you can imagine
yourself. Yeah.
place
I mean,
yourself.
it's funny, we revert to some old school museum language, which is if it has a pedestal or a plinth or some box underneath it, it means don't engage. And if it doesn't, it means engage. So like, how do you define these spaces through this subtle or not so subtle language? And it works. It's, nothing I would normally think, oh, well, that's so exciting. And it's the post-Brancusi no. Like you're not supposed to use that shit underneath you. But it's the formal language that everybody understands once they're inside a museum. And so that way I feel like it's generous in that it's pretty plain.
Well, it's also this funny, like it's a picture of a kneeler. It's not a kneeler. Like there are other parts of the show where you can use things and you can sit, and even Sheila's the very rich like skeins that are coming down in the middle of the image. That's a piece that the audience was allowed to take apart by using the yarn. But then here's this piece that's a kneeler, which sort of invites some kind of atonement, but it's
Right.
on a platform.
Well, it's how sculpture gets read, which is always my complaint, that it's something you can walk around and project yourself into, which is a kind of normal role of contemporary sculpture, that it's an object to be contemplated, and it's not a piece of furniture. It's the idea of a piece of furniture, or it's a piece of sculpture in the shape of a piece of furniture. And I think I get that from from Gober, actually, where he will make something, hand make something that is a thing, and then morph it as a good surrealist would. But yes, it's part image and part object and completely made up I don't think there's a church in the US with that kneeler in it, but could be.
And theatricality too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
I think that's the Roman and that's the Italian part, I think. I think that's from us being in Italy for all that time, where everything is really a weird kind of spectacle, whether it's a museum or a church or a garden or a boat tour or the seaside ancient history. It's crazy spectacle land.
We were in, just to pull people in, Sheila and I were at a residency called Civatella Ranieri in Umbria for 2 months. So we
traveled beforehand.
And traveled also. So that all of those images, all of the things that we looked at were very fresh in our mind as we were finishing up the preparations for this show.
So I mean, this piece is a little older, right?
Yeah.
But here, so this is pre-Italy, but I'm still thinking about, I mean, if you think about this, the hanging, the rigging, the construction of stages, and the illusion of a set, I'm just curious if if you could maybe talk a little bit about the theatricality, and I want to come back to the Roman, because I think that's fascinating. Of Fellini-esque spectacle, but also constant performance and dialogue with decoration too. But I don't know, could you talk a little bit about maybe the stagecraft and theatricality in the painting specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think this one I'm sort of pulling it out in a much more explicit way by calling it this, but many of the paintings are, a sort of invitation to spaces. And usually impossible spaces. And these two paintings were in this room where we talked about how abstraction might be used as a form of to express sort of political content. So I think of these two paintings in particular as I'm always interested in how sort of spectacle operates both as a gesture in painting and then as a sort of larger construct. Like, where do emojis come from? You know what I mean? I know they come from
the
somewhere.
factory.
The factory.
But it's like, we're all drinking the Kool-Aid here, and nobody wants to look behind the curtain. So,
I think that comes from a happier time, 2015. I think,
But I think, I mean, this painting in particular, I was definitely thinking about things like, The Wizard of Oz, or, always with my work, I'm thinking about scale. What is our relationship to the size of the image? And then what our relationship to the size of the marks. So I kept thinking of this painting in particular as a very large, it's a large painting, but a large space. And Sheila was instrumental in helping me think of the title for this painting. So I'm sure she has her 2 cents on it.
Yeah, I'm the titler. They have to go through the Moyer, but this is, I know this works so well, and it's easier for me to write, give her title options, because I like words that way. I like weird titles. But her paintings are so evocative that it's another projection game of like, you know, what is that? And that seemed especially intergalactic to me. So, and other things like emojis and a factory. It was clearly a factory.
Absolutely. And do you like just looking at this recent one, right? This is the I think this painting in the show. I mean,
Yeah.
does that idea of spectacle as a gesture in painting, has that changed since 2015? I mean, is this because it seemed to me like change with our times, you know, change to the times. It seemed to have like its own manifestation in the show, of course, like everything, you know, different kinds of theater and spectacle. But so this is 2000.
Yeah, no, I was, you know, very directly thinking about all of the prosceniums, all of the altarpieces, all of the swags of curtains, or either the literal velvet curtains or the painted on curtains on frescoes. The fact that being in a place where there's this history of sort of covering every surface with an interesting pattern, which makes you, which kind of arrests you in the moment, and then as you move away, you have a different relationship to it optically. So it's definitely thinking about, you know, the problem with the tabernacle is what goes in the tabernacle, right? For me, as somebody who wasn't raised, even though I'm dominant culture, like Christian culture, I wasn't raised in a religious family. It was like, well, what do you put in the tabernacle? Except people.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a sort of a question of how do you make this thing that feels both sort of pompous and glorious and richly patterned, but not telling you, you know, kneel at the feet of Jesus Christ or whatever, or the Venus of Willendorf, choose your icon.
Right.
The Venus would have probably gone in somebody's pocket, I think.
That's true.
Or purse.
Yeah.
Or grave, basically. Probably where she got found, somebody's grave. I mean, I think that's the thing what I mentioned about Italy is that it's like, it's a place that's constantly going back to somebody else's stuff, right? It's the go to the Greeks, or the Greeks were there ahead of time, but nobody really talks about that part. And then this constant reuse of historical rejuvenation of things. And I mean, it's sick to say, but even their fascist architecture is Roman architecture made fascist. It's like, oh, it's so much better than the German stuff. It's just, but the Roman spectacle, we're made aware of that as soon as this moment we learn about the Colosseum. And then when you go to even Herculaneum, which is the little brother of Pompeii, it's not, the scale of it is not so spectacular, but the whole idea of it is like remarkable. The spaces and everything turns it, everything is a whole. There is no painting, sculpture, and everything is everything. Architecture, it's all one thing, which is
that's a really
I don't know if that's a spectacle or just a nice way to live.
Right. But yeah, like you said, every surface being decorated in some way, you know,
Right.
Costuming, performative gesture, just a spectacular moment in a piazza. Like it's always a language of adornment all the time.
Yeah.
And
It's like, why would you
consideration.
leave something plain? You
Right.
wouldn't. You have a blank wall, you have a floor, you need a mosaic,
Yeah.
Right.
you need a fresco.
Even the simplest patterns that occur in the cobblestone streets are the stone masons, entertaining themselves, I think. I mean, I think that even if it's very rudimentary, or minimalist, if you will, there are these arcs and, that are just amazingly beautiful and part of a tradition of doing something. So everything is a craft, which is my ideal space, right? A painting is a craft, and it's 5 different crafts of painting, not just one craft. Fresco is a big deal, right? So, and then all the other things that come from after through easel painting. But so it's, one would, it's a desire, I think, when you're an artist, that you would live in a place, you would live in a culture that really cares deeply about that stuff,
Yeah.
right? And about looking and about how things, the materiality and
but just everyday craft as
Yeah.
a potential for spectacle too, even. Yeah.
Or the workers who made it, or but I don't think we do
No.
quite yet. I don't know if we ever will, but we're here to try to make it
We're
so.
working on it.
Yeah. Okay, so this is, I mean, one of the more significant gestures in this show, right? Is this new collaborative 26 set of drawings from the residency together. And they're clear, not like we were looking at a fresco, right? And there's so many clear nods to these surfaces that you encounter throughout. But and it's so decorative too, and yet it's kind of flat, or flattening. I look, as I'm looking at our little Zoom windows, I'm like, okay, wow, these are not unlike screens in some way. But I'm, just hearing you talk about the relationship to craft and, the everyday, and thinking about, well, this is where we work. You can work with us too. I'd love to know more about this collaboration, but then thinking too about your own, if being in Italy at this residency and traveling as well, if that changed your own conversations historically with materials and decorative patterns, or how those interfaced.
I mean, this was we didn't know what we were going to do. We knew we needed to make a piece collaboratively for this show, but we knew it had to be on paper because we didn't want to ship anything heavy. But it took us, I'd say, 2 or 3 weeks to figure out how to actually work together, because in each time we collaborate, we have to establish a process, and we've done it about 3 or 4 times now, where we do a pretty substantial body of work, but figuring out the sort of the game plan.
Those aren't devils, those are bullhorns, just want to say. It's important to...
Oh, in this one here?
Yeah, those are bullhorns, not devils. Okay. I just need to set that straight. Okay.
So I don't know, how did we arrive at, I know. Sheila, you want to describe how you basically came up with the first
So if you go back to the big drawing, I can show you. So if you go to it doesn't matter, the left or the right, there's a window in the center where you are, go one over.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the first drawing. And it got put away and then resurrected when we figured out, like I made the outside and Carrie made the inside. And we were trying a bunch of different things to try to figure out what we were going to do. Maybe just a suite of drawings and each one different. And we had been looking at a lot of altarpieces and a lot of architecture. And this seemed like the perfect plan to make this thing that almost read as a predella,
Mm-hmm.
but create an altarpiece that had no imagery in it, just architecture. Like all the architecture was imagery, and then of course that opened up possibility for a lot of decoration and a lot of graphics, which I'm really like. If it were up to me, this whole thing would be just in black and white and maybe one color. And then, but we were doing it with Carrie Moyer, so it's like, okay, you figure that out, and I can't paint a sky. Carrie can.
And Clarity, I'm answering Clarity's question on here. Yes, there are labyrinths in there.
Oh yeah, up here,
Yeah.
labyrinths. So we'd each take a turn at drawing one completely or half of one or do it. So we would we got to this, like I would make a form and then Carrie would draw it into it, and she'd paint
it
into
off.
it back and forth. And some of them are, yeah.
I mean, we figured out a way to both make our own drawings. Like we would make a set of like quote unquote identical drawings, or we'd each make one from the pair. So it was actually incredibly fun. But it turned out to be so much work that we were like working our asses off the entire time we were there.
Many days off. We took the days off to go see frescoes, which was nice.
Yeah.
Because it looks like there's an ease about, like they just evolved and came.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is a later one, and it you can see that.
Right.
Because it's way more loosey goosey and more fun in a way.
Well, I think it's really, it's like, I think I made the big drawing and then started doing some of the detail, but it was like a typical, like lovely train wreck. I could show you one of the others that I made. And then Carrie cleaned it up and I was like, oh, you cleaned it up. And I was like, okay, it looks better. But I got to do the sculptures in this one. And the rose, the quote unquote, I got into the stained glass window thing, apparently, big time.
Yeah.
So this was the most like sustained, maybe I'm wrong, but sustained collaboration, right?
Yeah.
But if let me see, before I get to this, like if we look at this old, like,
oh yeah,
I'm so.
This is the first.
Is it really?
Basically, we applied to go to Yaddo as collaborators because we wanted to go together. And, we weren't sure that we would even be able to collaborate because we're so sort of insistently in our own stuff.
Right.
But we were like, okay, we're going to have 11 by 14 pieces that we pass back and forth to each studio. So
a lot of these we set up the parameters, like the structure, the size of something, the rules of the game, like that whole opera buffa had a whole set of drawings of what everything would be ahead of time, so we were on task. And this was the simplest. It's like I put the before we got the stretchers, and we went to the store and bought fabric. So we agreed on the fabric choices, and I got to make the structure and and stretch the fabric, and then I handed it to Carrie and she painted it. It's like a one-way street.
But later on, we did lots of other things.
Right.
So yeah, this was our training wheels. of collaboration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
And it
like
kind of looks like it. And I like that's
Yeah.
good.
there's a really nice friction, right? Like you can see
Yeah.
tug of war. Well, I have just a couple more questions, and then we should probably turn it over to audience questions, which I'm
Right.
starting to see a couple of, and you guys should continue to put those there. I have one really specific, and then one that's like those like I'm still forming it in my head bombs, but it might open up something really productive. And you know, you've done a number of recent conversations about the work, but there were a couple lines that stuck with me, and I've been looking at these two a lot. These are two of my favorite little gems in the show, both from 2007, kind of interestingly. And Sheila said obsolescence is an underrated thing. And I kind of took that to mean like this, like we have great value in something running its course, you know, or that like a thing could exist and then it evolves. I'm sure there's much more to that. And Carrie, you said we've lost ephemeral culture, you know, that everything is infinitely archived, be it on the
Right.
internet or elsewhere, especially
Yeah.
in, you know, whether it's this conversation being recorded or, you know, one could drown in decades watching things archived on the internet. But looking at these and thinking about form, and that form is always political, like I'm trying to get my head around something about the totemic in both of these and their relationship to time, but especially things being obsolete, you know, and things being ephemeral. Maybe the worst question, so apologies, but I don't know, like there might be something to open up here.
I
These
mean,
are,
I think would have very different answers to this. So,
yeah.
like for me, I think I did a series of these little paintings. They're like 20 by 24, so they were literally sort of abstract icon. And I was looking at like ceramics in the Rockefeller wing at the Met. I was looking at like indigenous art, and trying to figure out a form that would summon up the figure without telling us it was a figure. And then also using a sort of cruciform composition, which is, you know, keeps you inside the frame. So it's both a logo and something that doesn't, it's, you know, one of the first ways of thinking about composition, like how do we stay inside the picture frame? You're not allowed out, you're not looking out. So in that sense, that becomes a kind of religious compositional device, right? In the same way a mandala is, or
Central core.
anything that doesn't allow you to leave the space of the painting. And sure Sheila has a totally other answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the least ephemeral things I've made in my life. So, and it's in a size and also scale that I'm more apt to show people now, because I've kind of outed myself with the whole long series of votive moderns. And those are also often, a lot of them are central core, and a lot of them are not at all, or kind of play with that totem idea or the religious iconography of a tabletop Madonna. But this is one of these things that happened as an accumulation of, I taught at RISD, and with some of the students, Some of the glass students did, we did this collaborative crazy thing, and they made these, it's like I had been around glass as an undergrad at Mass Art, and it was always something that had always looked too beautiful, and so we tried to make these things that were just like weird little not very beautiful things, nothing sandblasted. Some of them looked like peepees. And I have a box of them and I didn't know what to do with them. At the same time, on the way up and down, I was reading it was during the Bush 2 administration, and I thought, oh, this is a very good time to read Ayn Rand. And so I read all of it, including Atlas Shrugged, which is about train magnate Dagny Taggart on the train, which is a whole nother story. And then in that story, there's this wonderful piece of bullshit, American, that's like real American. It makes so much more sense now that America's dollar sign is its US, as its insignia. Like it's the only country that has that. And I'm like, oh, that. So this is Dagny Taggart's tool. Her tool, her tool, and her tool. It should probably be 3 of Dagny Taggart's tools, Dagny T. Or there should be an S on it. But so this is definitely something that is my playful mind, making something at the time is so obscure that nobody will ever understand this. But maybe in retrospect now to see Dagny Taggart's tool, I don't know what you think. But that is very American. It goes with American Bardo.
Yeah.
They're like bookends.
And sort of not, they're, as you said, sort of like, yes, in the vein of the votive moderns, but kind of a little bit farther from some of the other large scale pieces. But then,
there's these multiple channels that have been, I've been working in for 20 something years. And now they're just during COVID, I've really made nothing, just a few small things that are coming out of it. But I now see them as I'm going to put them all together now and just go for broke. And I haven't really made anything. I've just been thinking and teaching myself about learning about things and understanding what I want to make work about. And this is great that you picked this out, because it's part of my past art making, but it's also, I see it as part of my present and future, which is something I have like a problem with. It's no longer a problem, but I kept them separate because I didn't think anybody was going to be able to accept that they would go together. And now
they do.
And now they do. They do because they did all along. I just wasn't ready for prime time or something. I don't know.
Know that about the dollar sign, and that's a great tidbit.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It says it's US right there.
Well, that might actually be a good segue into my last question. It would have to do with the future of Tabernacles for trying times, because I know that we'll hopefully get to or IRL as experience Tabernacles in January at the Museum of Art and Design, and
Right.
Sheila, having seen Hot Mess Formalism in I think two of its iterations, right? At the IMPay building at the Everson, and then also the Bemis Arts Center in Omaha. I mean, it shifts so dramatically. Radically. And actually, the Everson's a little bit like, at least with that height there, like the Portland Museum. But I'm curious because Tabernacles, I mean, that was these trying times are a whole new set of trying times.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. I mean, of course, there, the brutalizing of Black and brown Americans by police is not new. there's been an amplification perhaps in this moment, but the show was conceived of before the pandemic and went up. So I'm just curious kind of about how the next iteration of Tabernacles and Trying Times might look.
I think we didn't know that there would be a pandemic, but we did know the other things were a problem and that we were experiencing some trying times. I mean, Carrie and I could have called the show we did together 10 years ago Trying Times, because we've been living with trying times for a while. But
I mean, I think a lot of the stuff, the sort of social justice aspect of, what has become newly aware, or people seemingly have become newly aware of a lot of the things that are happening, were embedded in the backbone of the original show up in Portland. I mean, that's what creating this parlor for the people was. The education department at the PMA made this amazing range of programming around race, around gender, around sexuality, around voting rights, immigration, was meant to take place in this space.
Yeah, the parlor was never supposed to be about art in particular. It was always supposed to be a place for people to just meet and talk about stuff. Right. Their stuff. They knew our interests in social justice, and so this will have to be a lot more, like, obviously hands off. So everything's up on a plinth. We're still trying to orchestrate something with the common sense piece, but only is kind of choreographed version of it with certain knitters or crocheters, and the awareness that the parlor for the people will go online because there's no other way to do it. And it'll be.
But the show itself will be open.
Yes,
we think.
We hope, and we're going forward with that. But
sorry, the parlor will be online.
Well,
I mean, the
notion of the programming of the parlor will be a virtual programming, right? But the objects will be there as objects in place. And the big thing is that it's in the second floor, so it's a completely reduced version of everything. It's almost like a taste, a redux. And it's showing some key points that we work together with everybody at both locations. So we're happy to have it.
And I think it'll also have a more, it'll have a different emphasis on the ephemeral part, the parts of, the part where we're showing source material and things that, for my piece, a lot of activist stuff that was made in the 90s that has, gone the way of whatever. I can't even find those Quark files anymore when people ask me for them. I mean, they are truly gone. So part of the show sort of documents a kind of both lesbian feminist culture and a kind of New York punk queer culture from the late 80s and 90s that people may not have seen, at least in our context. So
I'm not sure if any of my Boston stuff is there, but whatever. The funny thing about this is that we both came from, different social justice origins, and then learned to accommodate the dominant caste, right? I think perhaps the best reading is this new book that's come out. In any case, to communicate with an audience who wanted to see art, political art in only one way, and and I, from the start, was very resistant to that. I mean, I made my lesbian work when I was a young lesbian, and I wanted to embed it. I saw the art world as a political arena that was not able to take on different ideas simultaneously, or different agents simultaneously. And so, you know, now's the time to kind of really, for me, it's at this point in my life and really getting a handle on my whiteness is, and my origins of birth as well as culture, is to think about what I think is the, you know, the death culture of Catholicism as being the place my work resides, you know, and that, you know, that's why all the Roman stuff for me, and that's why the Catholic references. And I mean, it's ironic because I'm an atheist now that I know what I know, but the culture of religion is mind-bogglingly good. It's a little crazy. Is that too?
No, that's great. I'm
too heavy for you?
No,
There will be no more questions now.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to hand it off to Carrie now.
No, that was great. I'm going to just actually stop sharing my screen so I can go take a look at the questions over here. But because I haven't been able to see them. But please, I think we have time for a few questions.
Great. I have questions.
So please send us Q&A. Here we go. This is from Sophie Koval. Thank you so much, Sheila, Carrie, and Anthony. I love the language of social justice origins, and I'm curious to hear more about how the Dyke Action Machine came into being, and Sheila, your own political origins, which you just got maybe a taste of, and what your respective relationships to public art now are.
Well, Dyke Action Machine was something that was started, it's by me and the photographer Sue Schaffner in 1991. Anyway, it was around for 14 years. We were sort of in the middle of coming out of ACT UP, Queer Nation. There was a group called the Lesbian Avengers, and Sue and I decided that we wanted to use our graphic design skills because we both worked in advertising. We were drudges at ad agencies to do activism. So that's sort of a huge part of my DNA, and I've also done agitprop for a lot of different New York groups in the 90s. So in terms of public art, I mean, I think this goes back to the question that Anthony asked earlier around ephemera. I'm very much in love with sort of the print culture that I came up into the world with, which was band posters, activist posters, stuff just wheat pasted on the street. Like, to me, that's like my, you know, so this way of communicating that maybe only the people in the 5-block radius know about. And those are the people who show up to stuff. So it's a really different, you know, I guess we'd call it like a micro ad campaign now or something, but it's a different relationship to community. It's a different relationship to things like most liked or popularity or however we measure these things.
Yeah.
But I'll let Sheila talk about her roots.
My deep roots are that I grew up in the Second Vatican Council Catholic Church in the 70s. So, like, for example, my sister, who's 7 years older than I am, initiated me to Corita Kent and Ben Shawn. So those were our art heroes. And we would make fake Corita Kent's linoleum block things that said peace and love. And we were just, you know, it's like we were an anti-war family. My brother got a CO from Vietnam, a bunch of things like that, you know, that now they look different so many years later, but that's what it was. And so that was an early imprint. And then later when after I went to a 4-year women's college, Catholic women's college, I went to Mass Art and came out and immediately radicalized, because I was like, shit, I'm a lesbian. I had no idea that there were even lesbians. That's how small my world was. And then patriarchy just, it was like, why didn't I know that there were something called lesbians? Like, so the entire patriarchal order just like popped into frame crazy way. So it's, you know, my Second Vatican Council church and had, you know, Martin Luther King. It was built in '68, so Martin Luther King was in the church window. It was like a major stained glass window, and then later it was like, you know, radical lesbians in a restaurant in Alston with, you know, and we were like part of the Rainbow Coalition. It was like crazy. We expected that people, by that time, we expected that people were just not going to like us and that we didn't have anywhere to go. And I think a lot of this is realizing we spent our whole lives figuring out a place to be, and it's still not inclusive enough. So, and then it goes on. But a lot of the politics of my work is really embedded in the way it gets made, the how much it costs to get made, and how I work with places on the ground. And it's pretty small. It's a pretty small operation, and I like to make really big things. There was an early part where when it started that felt like infiltration, and that was the point. And then at a certain point I had to accept that the infiltration was no more. It was, you know, doing different things with the architecture and making space for people to feel comfortable and invited, as I had felt comfortable and invited, that idea of like, I work here, you work here. But so public art, you know, I think public art is really, I would love to make something big, but I don't need it to last forever. Like, I think public art, there's a reason why the statue of Marcus Aurelius is inside of a museum now, you know, because it was initially made to intimidate you, right? That's what gods and emperors and Confederate heroes and all that stuff, that original sense of sculpture was made to impress and intimidate, to keep people in their place. And I know modernism tried to do something else with it, but I don't always think it's meant to be there forever. I'm a bad sculptor that way. I think the best objects are human scale objects, or that are made for humans to enjoy in a temporary way. Yeah, attach the architecture in interesting ways, you know. Neo-Gothics of the Woolworth building with all the little guys doing their job, you know. So I think we don't have a big enough conversation about what sculpture really is to go at the politics of sculpture, because I think that people haven't developed a really sophisticated language for it. Mostly the language is for painting, for images, for painting, maybe for cinema, for video, but not sculpture. I don't really know why, but it seems to be missing. What's that?
That's so strange to think about, and yet we're in space with objects. arranged.
Yeah, but we're looking at screens all the time. I mean,
Well,
I
no,
think
I think-
that's a huge part of it.
What happened, I think, is that for me, the textile world, the craft world started to make a connection, which is wonderful, but also problematic because it's altered the conversation about what sculpture is. And if you want to know my ideas about that, you can read the piece I wrote for Haystack, actually. I think there's some requirements for sculpture, for art, that not all crafts can produce, but that's okay.
I wonder if it has to do with materials too. I'm sitting here and I'm looking at this little penny wrapper, which you gave me, Sheila, in another
lifetime.
Another lifetime, right, in person, and thinking just about how the material presence and material history and something like this that maybe just forgotten.
Well, sculpture, as we know it, is extremely young. It's really 100 years old, and it's drawing from so many sources, and it's so complicated who we're drawing from and what it is, and the class and origins of all of those objects are not, there's a big colonial history there, right? And I don't know if we're, I don't know if we're in a place to have, I think we're in a place to have that conversation, because it makes very clear all of a sudden who have been the sculptors, why it's been raced and gendered big time in the way it is, and what all of those different processes require in as far as the politics of the art world is currently. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'd love to, let's start something, Anthony.
Yeah, exactly.
Sculpture and performance, because sculpture is always performative. Thank you very much. Yeah. You can't just stand on one side of it to get it.
No. We have one final, and she said, thank you very much. Are there any particular artists, authors, musicians, filmmakers that influence this exhibition in particular?
Well, for me, it's,
I mean, I
you
think
go, Carrie.
I just came at this, I mean, the place where I think Sheila and I met when we first started talking about this show was, I felt like this idea about activism is something that has been, the more I'm known as a painter, the less that aspect of my practice people know about. So the sort of impetuses or the desires that were created by doing activism with a lot of different people in a lot of different configurations, and the idea that it's a porous place where people are invited to come in and out and commit as much time or as little time as they want, was something I was really interested in reconnecting with. And I think for me that, and Sheila used the word big tent when we first started talking about this idea, like so in the beginning, our first
is the big tent.
plan was to actually have me make like some kind of painting that was a tent, that went over everything. But and so that was sort of how my values intersected with things that Sheila was really thinking about.
Well, it's like it's what's a tabernacle, it's a place you put things you really care about inside. But it's also, it's a big tent, it's a circus, it's a tent revival. It's like all of the stuff you really care about without this God guy hanging out there. at all. So it's just us. It's like all the other reasons why you would want to come together with people. Like, not just a town hall, which is an interesting artifact of New England, and but something more
But
special.
I also think there's like a aspect of passion or some
Yeah,
sort of emotional, big emotions.
yeah.
Big emotions that
big
we
emotions.
are, you know, we're so polarized right now. We're sort of afraid to have them in front of each other.
Right.
So I think that was something we were thinking about a lot.
There's room for all those big emotions.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the funny thing is I always think I'm more regular than I'm like, I can't deal with that. I'm not good with groups. Okay, I get all. I would, you know, I'm good with the work group if we have a task. But the thing about the whole knowing we were coming up to an election year was that, is there a way to make a tent big enough for everybody? And I, you know, it's a different question now, I think, in some ways. But I think with some more shared language and understanding of how the world is put together, yeah, there is still that possibility. And right now we see a kind of centrist location, you know, I'm a kind of a centrist in trying to make a place for everyone. And then when we get down to like the details, I often will go out to an extreme location that is less centrist than I want to be able to provide. And I think that just comes from, you know, coming from a family where, you know, my dad left school in the 7th grade, and knowing that there are a lot of people who in my family, extended family, who I don't talk to anymore, but who feel radically different about the world than I do. And thinking about it with some, you know, it's real, and some kind of remorse about that realness. Not like I could have done anything different about it, but
I also think we were thinking very much of it being up in Maine, which is got a, you know, very particular demographics,
Right.
and you know, is there a way to see a place like a museum as a sort of meeting house instead of a kind of elitist, you know,
Right.
place where you need to know so much about everything before you're even really invited in? So that was,
it dovetailed with their sensibility. I think Mark Basier and Jamie and our curator, and they really wanted to be that for their community. And so we were like, our ideas and their ideas, we were like a match made in heaven. But I have to say, that's what a museum like that does or can do. I think often just does now. That, you know, it's a community center as well. It's a place for kids to have programming and films, and it's a cultural center. It's almost a Kunstverein. It's a collection.
A meeting house. That's
yes.
Yeah, a cultural meeting house, which is ideal.
Well, I want to thank you both so much for being here and creating some kind of a meeting house with us in this strange cyber situation we find ourselves in so often. But I really appreciate your generosity and time. Thank you. And
Me too.
we'll look forward to this next iteration too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're so excited it's coming to MAD. It's going to be really great. It's great to test it out in a new way, in a different environment.
And there are a few more days in Portland, should you find yourself
Yes.
Thank you, Anthony,
bigger
and thank
one.
you, Libby.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Well,
Bomb.
Anthony.
Carrie,
Thank
you beat me
Bob.
to
We
the
love
punch.
Bob.
I was going to say all my thank yous. That was so beautiful, and I feel like it was lavish in a way to be able to walk through there with you and hear the thought process and hear, you know, also origins of where these pieces have arrived from. So thank you so much. And Anthony, it was beautiful, beautifully done. I loved your introduction. And okay, so we're dropping the link. Go view this yourself. Go experience it yourself. Have a moment, have a weekend, absorb these pieces on your own. Now you have a little window in. I feel like I'm going to have a deeper connection to all the pieces. Also, thank you for being here. You have many ways to spend your evening, and you've spent it with us, and we really appreciate it. And last but not least, you can subscribe to BOMB. It's very easy. We've been around since 1981. We're not going anywhere. So this is our current issue sitting right next to me. We have a great
Beautiful.
subscription deal. Thank you. We will drop that link into the side and make it really easy for yourselves. So, and also we have a wizard behind all this. His name is Josh. So thank you, Josh,
Yay,
for being with
Josh.
us.
Thank you.
And wizard behind the curtain. And join us. We are going to have another room with you in September. So that's coming soon. And we will send you a cool email tomorrow that gives a little sort of artist advice and the nice little clips from tonight. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Anthony, Sheila, and Carrie. And
Thank you.
be well.
Thank
Be
you so
well.
much.
Yes.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Yay. I'm turning into an emoji.